An international strategy goes hand in hand with your corporate strategy, and you need to think global from day one.
Welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast, where experts discuss international content management, product localization, and global expansion. I'm Caterina from Undertow. We create and manage localization programs for B2B SaaS companies so they can grow globally. Today, our founder, Nicola Calabrese, will be talking with Émilie Némorin, Product Localization Manager at Zoom. She helped companies from Booking.com to Adidas scale their global offering. Together, they will dive into how to break down silos, speak stakeholder languages, and integrate localization seamlessly into your product development process, plus the metrics and the best practices you need to prove ROI and drive international growth. So, without further ado, let's dive in.
Hello, Émilie, and welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast. How are you today?
Hi, Nicola. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. And today we're going to talk about a topic I really like. It's collaboration among different teams in localization. But before we jump right into the topic, would you mind introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey in localization?
Yes, of course. So I'm Émilie. I am half French, half Mauritian, and I've been living in Amsterdam for 7 years already. I've been working in localization for about a decade. I've had several roles in this wonderful world of localization. So I've been a translator. I worked as a localization specialist for the French market at Booking.com for a few years. Then I transitioned into project manager role for localization at Adidas, then moved on to a more strategical role as a localization program manager and a team leader in an HR tech company called Talent. And finally, right now, I'm a product localization manager at Zoom. So I've always been on the client side, as we say.
And how do you define localization in the context of B2B SaaS? And why is it particularly important for international expansion, in your opinion?
Yeah, so as a general definition, I would say that localization is what enables you to take your business global. And so access more customers, of course. It is about having an international reach while still being relevant in each market that you want to target, right? And a company achieves this through language, so translation, cultural adaptation, user interface adjustments, and so on. But of course, in today's world, a business is actually global from the moment that they have a website. So because it can be accessed by just anyone in the world at any time, so really people can discover your products and services, your brand, but borders haven't really disappeared in a sense that's why localization is so important for business. Because even though potential customers can interact or engage with your business, you still need to appeal to them by speaking their language and fixing the problems that they have in a way that works for them. And this is how and when localization comes into play. And it's quite complex because you don't have a one approach fits all markets, right? And also in a way, it's good to remember that localization is a revenue enabler and that's not a cost center. It's particularly important for international expansion because anyone starting a business needs to have a global mindset from the beginning, because otherwise, if you decide to think about globalization and thus localization later, you're going to have some sort of depth, right? That you need to catch up on things. And in this digital world that moves really fast, is just a miss for any business.
Yeah, I agree that. And if I think about digital products like apps or similar things, if you don't think about making let's say the code ready for being localized afterwards, that would be a headache. To do retrofit things afterwards, it's a big headache. And same for website as well. If it's useful, even if you don't start right off with several languages, the website, think about your domain structure and things like that. To have in mind, if tomorrow, next, we're gonna do several languages. How do we do it? Do we have a single domain with subdomains? This kind of things you can think about it so you don't get problems down the line because you have to figure out and go back. Once you already expand them, maybe you have a big product or a big website and you have to figure out how to restructure that. That's absolutely,
Yeah, exactly what you say.
And in your experience, like which teams do you collaborate with most frequently when implementing localization strategies? And how do you ensure like alignment between localization efforts and the goals of different teams?
Yeah, so I want to say, when you implement localization strategies, you may need to collaborate with just anyone, but it really depends on the level of maturity of the localization program itself, as well as the companies. For instance, if it's a very new business and they're already thinking global, and I don't know, they hired a localization manager or program manager, that person would need to set up everything from scratch, right? So they would need to work with a leadership team to make decisions on where to concentrate localization efforts, with the ops or data team to conduct market research and retrieve data to make those informed decisions, the engineering team for ensuring internationalization, just like what you mentioned, right? Making sure that the code is ready, the marketing and product teams as well, to establish processes and timelines so that those people also know how and when to put in a localization request for each launch, etc. So yeah, that's pretty much everyone. And alignment between the localization efforts and any other team goals is essential, right? So, and how can you achieve this? I would say, for me, there are three main things. The first one is really to be proactive, to reach out to the relevant teams you work with. And then your mission is to identify where localization can be added in their processes and their definition of done, so that you don't have a passive role anymore of just receiving requests downstream, but you can identify where you can add value. And this is a way for you to position localization and yourself as a critical stakeholder, right? The second thing is speaking your stakeholders' language and showing them how localization can benefit them. So, for instance, if you're working with engineers, what usually interests them is the technical aspects of things. For instance, which kind of automations can help make their work and yours smoother, connecting their repository to the TMS or the translation management system and so on. And I would say the last thing is listen and be humble. So really trying to understand each team's or department's unique challenges, getting invited into their monthly all hands or meetings, or, each department or team has those kind of meetings where they do a monthly review of what's happening. And also try to build rapport with one or two colleagues from those teams, people who usually have a natural interest in localization, who can help answer your questions, but who can also be localization champions for you whenever you need something from those team or departments. So yeah, that's what I would do, to ensure alignments and make sure that localization is visible.
Yeah, because I hear like sometimes the challenges, especially in very big companies, to have people know that there's even a localization department. Like sometimes in big companies, people in other departments, they don't usually interact with languages. They're not even aware that there's actually a localization team. So sometimes they handle like translation related or language related things on their own, and obviously it's not their thing, so it's just one thing on top of everything else. And if they only knew there was somebody in the company that just do that, it's a big help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can you share maybe an example of a successful cross-team collaboration that really improved like your localization efforts?
Yeah, so I'm a localization person and I'm not at all a technical person, but I do have a lot of technical needs in my job. So for me, an example of a successful collaboration like that has been with engineering teams. So establishing good relationship and rapport with engineers, at least one, just like one who's usually a senior one who understands or has had experience with localization, has been essential for me. Because on the one hand, they are the ones responsible for a successful internationalization, right? So as you mentioned, it's about making adaptations to the code layers so that localization downstream can take place smoothly, especially for software, web, and mobile apps. And on the other hand, they have the expertise to help localization, or me or whoever is in this role, with setting up automations with the TMS and the code, perhaps even the CMS down the line or any other tool that you may use. Finally, for product localization specifically, they're also the ones who will push the strings into the TMS, and they're responsible for the timelines and QAs and so on. So it has been really important and essential that I've always worked in an aligned way with them, making sure that we work in a similar rhythm and that each party's needs are clear, and that we reassess that as well from time to time, saying, hey, is this way of working still working for you? Yes, no, and then we adapt it, because there's some sort of synergy, I would say, for me at least, with engineering teams.
And for example, do you have like specific meetings with engineering teams like on a regular basis to review processes, or is just in general course of business?
So usually, like if you start in a new role, I would say it's super important that you get to know them and get to understand how the code works, especially if you work on product localization as I do. So how the code works, what are the repositories, what's the architecture like, what's the lifecycle development like, if you work in sprints, what is the calendar. So really getting to understand those. So this is more of a, let's say, digging kind of work at the beginning, and finding that champion that I mentioned. So one or two or more, if possible, understanding also how they are set up. So who's the TL, who's the QA, who's the backend developer, who's the front-end developer, having this mapped out. And then so you know who to reach out to when you have questions, right? So to answer your question, you don't necessarily need to have constant chats with them, but you need to know who you should go to, and you need to know who's the person who's going to champion localization for you as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I like the idea, like mapping out, having an idea like who's working on front end, who's on back end, who's responsible. So that's really, really useful as well. And like when you talk about in general to stakeholders that are not, let's say, from localization, like what strategies do you use to communicate the value of localization? So they understand, like, so because they might not be very familiar with the impact on international growth of localization.
Yeah, so there are many ways to communicate the value. For me, the very basic and I would say straightforward one is to introduce localization to new starters in the company. So in my previous role, I ran intro to localization sessions, and I really noticed that 90% of the people joining the sessions would not know what localization was about. So having this moment, this opportunity to explain what it is, what's the impact, how it's done within the company, and how to put in a request. From the moment someone joins a company, this can be quite powerful because you're already planting the seed of curiosity and knowledge there, right? About localization exists and what it is. Then if you're talking to anyone else that's already in the company who joined before you did those sessions or anything, I've noticed that the best way to speak to them usually is in a language that they understand with tangible data. For instance, let's say the marketing team asks you to translate and adapt a new web page into, German and French. You can then show how much localization increases customer engagement by comparing the website traffic before and after the localization project has taken place. So it's really about, trying to understand the language they speak and how to present things to them in a way they would understand that would just make sense to them.
Sorry to interrupt your listening, but do you want to grow your B2B SaaS in international markets? Because every country is different, and what users value in one market doesn't necessarily matter in another one. At Undertow, we help B2B SaaS companies like yours succeed in their international expansion. We create customized localization strategies that address the unique challenges of each market. In this way, you can effectively attract, engage, and convert customers worldwide. Visit undertowlanguages.com to find out more. And now back to the show. Yeah, actually, this is going to something else I wanted to ask you, because it's true. Like, it's interesting to show them tangible results on their terms, so it's easier to understand. Because sometimes, like, localization people, we get bugged on like operational metrics that nobody else outside of localization really look at.
Yeah.
One example you show now is, as you said, like the website traffic before and after localization. What other metrics like do you usually use to show like the results or the impact of localization?
Yeah. So as a general rule, so I want to say that, measuring the success of localization through metrics is something anyone working in localization should do on a regular basis, so that you can provide insights whenever you're asked to. And yourself, you can follow the progress of your program, right? So I want to say that it shouldn't be something that is also, you should be proactive about it, is my point. And then it's kind of up to the localization manager to choose what, how, and when they wish to measure, also based on the available tools in the company, the different accesses that you may have, the support of other teams, because sometimes, you're not a data person necessarily, even though you want to track some things. So sometimes some other teams can help you and the company goals. So that being said, the metrics that you're going to track should absolutely showcase the impact of localization efforts. So I gave you an example earlier, but you can also focus on traffic. You can focus on acquisition insights. For instance, you can check the growth curve of, let's say, German-speaking users month over month when you've launched a new language, let's say German again. Or you can also check the feedback that you receive quarterly from, let's say, Spanish language quality for your help centers to understand what comes back at you. So basically, I would say it depends what you want to track, but there are so many ways and so many metrics that you can look at. You can be more number focused or feedback focused. Then another way for me is also highlighting when localization has played a crucial role in achieving, let's say, business goals. So for instance, if you've had a super important product launch, so highlighting the successful collaboration between localization and product teams. And I would present this information in different ways. So you can present them in a post-mortem meeting if that's something that's done at your company. So just to make sure that localization gets its little spot. It can be in the monthly company meeting if that's a possibility as well. And if you have one, localizations on your localization Slack channel, or I use Zoom Team Chat right now, so that's what I would do. But yeah, so making sure that this doesn't go unnoticed, right? So making sure to celebrate the wins of localization. But yeah, as you said, it's really good to keep in mind that most of the folks in your company won't understand localization industry, very specific metrics like number of translated words or LQA score or this sort of thing. So it's not really where you want to spend your time and energy.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely, if you shared like accurate scores, they don't really care or understand what it is, to be honest. I'm sure like they care more about, let's say, if it's a help center, how many like you reduce support requests or tickets, or how like the localization actually reduce the request of support, or SEO, multilingual SEO, how much more traffic you brought to certain markets. Yeah. It's true. And I like the thing that you can, in a way, you can compare as well, like markets, you're doing the same initiative across, let's say, 3, 4, 10 markets, and you can see how it changes, and that helps like internally the localization to figure out as well. Let's say in general markets, I've done like, this is like the baseline for this initiative, but you have one market that is not doing that well. So maybe it helps you figure out like, or maybe there's something wrong there or something that is not working. It might be that it could be localization specific, or it could be like, especially if it's marketing, maybe that specific topic is not that relevant in their market. And there's a feedback really useful for the marketing team as well. So this collaboration, I like that it helps quite a lot. That.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Yeah, and you can, as you said, come up with recommendations of what should be done or not. Yeah, excellent examples actually.
But like when you're working with different teams, like what are some of the biggest challenges that you face on a localization program, and how do you overcome maybe resistance or skepticism with teams, especially if they don't see immediately value what you're asking?
Yeah. So there are many challenges. I want to say maybe the biggest ones are, on the one hand, there are just a lack of understanding of what localization is. And you often see this when localization is an afterthought, when nothing works, right? So localization is requested late. A project just falls on your laps and you didn't know about it until the last moment, and it's needed yesterday. So we don't really understand how it works, all the moving parts of localization, how you should be involved from the creation phase of the feature or of the product, and just understand what it is about, if it makes sense for, let's say, if it's about data. Usually German users love data. So, if it's a P2 launch for global markets, maybe it's going to be a P1 launch for Germany or something like this. So you want to adapt messaging and all these things. So just not understanding what localization is and when it needs to happen is the biggest challenge. And the second is working in silos. So not just localization, but just the whole company. And there's the lack of communication among teams. So sometimes we can receive translations, the same translation request twice from two different stakeholders. Or timelines aren't clear between the teams, so they don't know when and what is happening. Again, resulting in last-minute projects or just poor source copy, which means localization takes even more time. And anyway, so there are so many challenges like this, mostly due to the fact that they don't really understand what localization is about, or they work in silos and communication is not really happening. And honestly, overcoming skepticism takes time and energy. But yeah, you shouldn't be too discouraged by it, because most of the time it's something that you can resolve from within. And it also goes back to what we discussed before about, let's say, I want to say educating in a way people about localization. Overall, like the way I've approached this every time is just take a step back and try to gather all relevant stakeholders in different meetings at different milestones of projects as well. So intro, if you're aware of it, of course. And then when you kick off the project, deliveries, and then post-mortem with some sort of checklist that you go through. And then that's the best way to align on the project. Usually this happens after something has gone wrong. So you just start doing these meetings when the project has already started. But for the following times, then you know how to approach things, and people are also more aware, because at the end of the day, we all want to work smoothly, right? We all want to do our product launch on time, our customers to be happy. So, and you realize that people are going to work with you on this. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And yeah, I do agree. Like, the point is, I feel sometimes, apart from the fact that I still get people, like, when I say localization, they think GPS, like positioning. So still,
it's true.
And sometimes I think, like, some of the stuff that they say they are not providing or they're not contacting localization beforehand is because they don't think it's necessary. We say maybe like, then we're going to send this for translation when we are close to the deadline and there's not much time for errors. Yeah, that's usually happens.
Oh, they often think you're the one, like the localization manager is the one translating.
Oh, yes.
But everything is Google Translate, So no, that's not how it works. So let me take you back to how it's done and everything. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When it comes, before you mentioned as a growth enable, which I completely agree. When it's still, let's say, in the cost center mindset, the thing like, how is it possible that this little team is spending so much money? It's because they might think that the couple of people that they have in the team are doing all the translation, all the work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, but I do agree that it takes time, but it's definitely, people work with you and help. It's most of the time, it's like they're not aware because they come from a different background or they have different things like priority in mind. So that makes absolutely sense. And like, what are some best practices that you would recommend for companies that would like to improve their localization processes? And how do you see the role of localization evolving in B2B SaaS industry, especially over the next few years?
Yeah, so maybe the first best practice I can think of is, if you do not have an expert dedicated to localization already, you should hire one. It's a full-time job. That's number one. Then just always remember that an international strategy goes hand in hand with your corporate strategy. And you need to think global from day one, because again, if you have a website, you are going to be global. So you need to understand where you will which markets you want to target the most and focus on, and then develop further. Regarding processes in particular, some of the ways to improve them, I would say, think of anything that can help you work in a streamlined way with automations between your tools and the translation management systems, or TMS. Have really strong internationalization practices in place. It's so important for longevity, making the localization workflow easy, finding strings easy, not having encoding issues, and so on and so forth. Having a foolproof way to collect localization requests on a company level, for instance, via a form. Some use Jira, some use ClickUp, and so on and so forth. So you have so many tools out there for this. And having localization as part of the definition of done in the workflows of other teams, I would say, is really important. So making sure that this is something you actively include localization in those processes. And the role of localization in the B2B, I mean, how it's going to evolve in the B2B industry, who knows? Yeah, things are constantly changing. And I think, I mean, from what I'm seeing, we can expect more and more SaaS using marketplaces and partnerships. So when I say marketplaces, I mean, for instance, Amazon, Etsy, or just partnerships that they have globally as a way to have a global reach. And this will surely change the rules of how we do international expansion in general. So just curious to see how, basically.
And before we close, anything else that you would like to discuss that maybe we haven't touched upon related to collaboration between teams or in general? Do you think it's really relevant as something that's really on your mind at the moment?
Yeah, I would just say, don't be shy. Really go to people, have chats. I know it's not always easy. I'm someone who's shy by nature, but I really learned that we're all here for the same thing. There are a lot of really cool people out there as well. So you get to build friendships for it as well. But yeah, your localization cannot just be in its little corner and doing its own thing. It really needs to be something that is done at a collaborative level within companies. So just make sure to go towards people and don't wait for them to come to you.
I think that's a really nice thought to close on. I love that localization allows you to work with people from different backgrounds and different departments. Yeah. That's really makes it always interesting. Yeah. So I would say this is a good note to close on. So it was a really great conversation. So thank you so much again, Émilie, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola, for inviting me. It was really interesting for me as well.
Thanks for joining us today. The Multilingual Content Podcast is powered by Undertow. We help B2B SaaS companies grow in any language. Get in touch if you want to know more. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episode. If you want to support us, remember to give 5 stars to the podcast. See you next time.